And here we go, Wednesday evening. It's Wednesday afternoon or morning, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome to this little place we call home. I'm actually joining all of you live today from the Maripville headquarters in Braine-l'Alleud in Belgium. So we had a bit of a jam-packed day, and I just made it in time to be here with all of you and with our guest of honor for today. Super excited and very much looking forward to having Jason Falkenberg from Ash Quarterly joining us here in just a second. Before we get things rolling, though, a little housekeeping. You all know the deal. If you're joining us live on Facebook, not only do we tremendously appreciate you and welcome you most wholeheartedly, but I also would love to invite you to please chime in, put your questions underneath the live stream into the comments. I'd love to forward them to Jason. And for everybody here at the lounge, you're all regulars, friends, family. Make yourselves heard. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. But without further ado, here is the one and only Jason Falkenberg from Ash Quarterly. Jason, many thanks for taking the time and welcome to Light 'em Up.
Thank you again for having me, Reinhard. I'm very, very excited to be here.
It's a privilege and an honor for us. Good to have you, and thanks for taking the time. I know for you it's a bit earlier. Where are you joining us from today, if I may ask?
So I'm just north of Orlando in Deltona, Florida.
And
So
you're home, I guess, right? So
yes, yep, home.
fabulous. Superb. Jason, we have plenty of things to cover. It's an exciting time of the year. We're towards the rear end or still sort of in the middle of the cigar award season with all the best cigar of the year and top 25 and the consensus coming out in just a bit. You had your own cigar of the year that you announced just a couple of days ago, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one aspect that I want to cover. But most importantly, of course, this is all about you. It's about your journey in the premium cigar world. It's about Ash Quarterly. And as a media outlet and a media professional, you have tremendously, I have to say, done things slightly differently with Ash Quarterly and the way you built this wonderful platform and everything around it. So why don't you give us a little bit of a brief introduction to Ash Quarterly and how you started the platform? Because we want to keep in mind that we have people joining us from all over the world, from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, all the way to the US and Middle and South America. So for those who are not familiar with Ash Quarterly, give us a little bit of the inside baseball as to how things came together, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very kind words. So we definitely try to do things a little differently than most. So I'm glad that that's translating well. So we actually just hit 5 years. So 5 years
Congratulations.
ago, thank you so much. It's been an incredible 5 years. Hopefully, we have many more, to come. So the idea started years ago. I used to be in much better shape. I'm trying to get back to it now. We'll see how that goes. But so I used to be working out all the time, really into fitness. I had my men's fitness magazine subscription. I had this other little subscription that they did monthly where you got samples of different, supplements and proteins and pre-workouts and all that fun stuff. And I remember sitting there one day thinking, why are they sending this separately? Why doesn't the magazine just come with this box of supplements and all that? And I was like, well, what can I do that could be something that, ties together like that? Obviously, it wasn't going to be fitness. I'm kind of glad it wasn't because nobody would buy a fitness magazine from me today. Uh, um, but so I sat there and I thought, I'm like, what am I passionate about? I love cigars. I love the community that it involves. I loved everything about it. And at that point, I didn't really love the magazines I was reading. I didn't feel like they were for me. You read them and they kind of, you got this $50,000 watch ad, and I'm like, I'm not buying a $50,000 watch. So it kind of started from there. I wanted to create a magazine that came with cigars. So that's what we did when we launched it. And, It was all about doing something different. And that has spiraled and changed over the years. We're drastically different than we were when we started. And I think we'll be drastically different in another few years.
Now, I think that for everybody in the game of media, publications, communication, marketing, the whole game has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and it seems that every month things are just accelerating even more. And there's a new technology, there's a new app, there's a new service plopping up every 5 seconds. Um, Yet I also firmly believe that some core fundamentals and core values always remain the same. And if we look at the history of humankind, even, I I firmly believe that our ways of communicating have always been the same. It's just that platforms and channels change ever so slightly. At at its very core, what do you think makes a great media outlet a worthwhile exploring and be successful?
It's tough. I think there's so many different demographics and segments of consumers out there. What works for one won't work for the other. But I think at its core, it needs to translate to that person. Are you reaching an individual? And everyone's gonna be different. There's people that are gonna love what Cigar Aficionado does and hate what I do, and vice versa. There's gonna be people that want to listen to a podcast and they never want to look through a magazine or read an article. They just want to hear. So I think it's being true to yourself is most important. You know, there's a reason I don't do my own podcast. That's not me. I would be so uncomfortable. People would see it and they'd never watch it. Um, so I think being genuine in what you do.
That's an excellent point. And the reason I framed the question this way, or why I'm curious, is we mentioned at the beginning that one of the core premises of Ash Quarterly is to do things slightly differently. And you even used that terminology when you spoke about what you did in the fitness industry. Um, what was your idea of doing things differently, or what was the, the quintessential, you know, idea or the inspiration that you had to stand out from the rest of the pack?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, when I started, still relatively young in my cigar journey. I didn't feel like there was something like that out there that spoke to me. So I wanted to do it different, but then not just for me, but one of the things we did from day one is have an article about a lady of the leaf, but a true lady of the leaf, not a model holding a cigar, but a woman who smokes cigars. Because I didn't see that as being very represented at that point, at least not on a, continual basis. So doing stuff like that, that ended up translating into giving consumers the voice. We started the first probably 2 years, give or take. I'm really bad with time frames, but with no ratings. We didn't do ratings because at that point I didn't like the way ratings were. I also didn't think that my opinion should validate this cigar. I say, hey, go buy it, and people buy it. Who am I to say that? Who am I to say this cigar is at 93 or 91 or a 60? It's all personal preference. So that's how we kind of got into the rating game. Was we wanted to give that to the consumer. So we created a monthly cigar club. At that point, I think we were calling it the rating club. And $30, you get 4 cigars. We also donated one to Cigars for Warriors, but the consumers would then in turn rate those cigars, and that's how the rating happened. So my opinion counted the same as everybody else's.
Mhm.
And I kind of liked that philosophy, and again, we've kind of tweaked that over time, but that was another thing, doing it different and taking away the 100-point scale, you know, breaking it down. Our ratings are broken down into 4 categories. So there's appearance, draw, construction, and taste. If you look at a lot of the bloggers, influencers, reviewers, whatever terminology we want to use, you know, a big chunk of that rating is based on taste. So then, if they do break it down, I've seen some as much as 60% is on the flavor or the taste, whatever descriptor they want to use. And that's the most objective part of a cigar. Me and you can have completely different taste profiles, but if it draws fine and the construction, the burn, all that's great, who am I to say it's a 70 compared to your 90?
Are all of the criteria that you mentioned for your ratings weighted equally?
Yeah, so they are all four rated equally. And when you look at the ratings, they'll break it down by appearance, draw, construction, taste, and then you get that overall rating, which is the average of all four.
What I find very interesting about that is me coming from a background in hospitality industry, wines and spirits, and I love all things sensory and sensory evaluation. I was trained at the WSET extensively doing blind tastings, and the aspect of blind tasting, I think, is when it comes to the baseline, sort of the only real way of evaluating a product just for what it is, right? Because everything is stripped away, and I've made a case repeatedly for the value of blind evaluation of all sorts of products, and that certainly applies to premium cigars as well. At the same time, though, we have to realize that by doing a blind tasting, we create almost an artificial or scientific way of reviewing a product, and doing that in a way that does not apply to how 99.9 of all the consumers out there enjoy that product. And so even though you could say there's a bias because of the ring and the designs and the box and the colors and whatnot, from the consumer's perspective, that is all part of the overall experience. So it has its place, and you described it perfectly. That should somehow factor into the way you perceive and thus also review a cigar if you want to really do it through the lens of the consumer.
Absolutely. And, I appreciate so much how blind reviews happen, and the science behind it, because it takes that bias away, especially when you're looking at bands and such. There's brands that you might not like, but you'll love the cigar if you don't know that it's that brand, right? Um, but the way I took it, and again, it's just a different method. It doesn't mean it's better, it doesn't mean it's worse, it's just different. And again, back to trying to do everything different. Um, but as a consumer, I never locked myself in a dark room and separated all other distractions and only drank water, no music, nobody smokes like that. And you hear some of these reviewers going through all this to do that. And I'm like, nobody's doing that. So is that average consumer getting all those nuances that you're describing? They're not. Um, not everyone smokes like me or you.
How was the immediate reaction from your readership, viewership, however you want to call it, when you started to truly proclaim that you want to put the consumer first, and you want to involve your readership in how the publication is framed, how it's put together, and ultimately how the reviews are composed. Because I think that's an interesting approach, and it's really true to the main purpose of it all, and that is to put the end consumer left, right, and center of it all.
Yeah, it's gotten mixed reviews. Some people don't love it, and then others, absolutely love what we're doing with that. Um, but at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to just being genuine. That's who I am. I'll never change that. There's things I haven't done because it doesn't, you know, correlate with who I am as a person and my core values. So it's interesting, and I'm glad that I haven't seen it change others and how they do their media, um, because then they're changing who they are, right? Um, it's interesting though. It has been a very split demographic out there of how people take it. But at the end of the day, I'm doing what I want my readers want me to do. Right.
What I find particularly interesting about the cigar media landscape as well is that, first of all, there's very few platforms out there that consider their media outlets their profession or their main responsibility in life. Most of them have day jobs, and they're either bloggers or vloggers or podcasters, and it's a very very passionate side gig for them. And there's only a handful of the bigger media outlets that do it full time and professionally. One thing that always struck me with Ash Quarterly is you managed from very early on to give the platform a very professional look, and the way you handle it and the way you treat it, the way you communicate it, I find to be very respectful and professional. Also in the way it is visually presented. When you, for example, look at past issues online, even the way it is designed, the way it is put together, looks properly. And people often discuss, is print dead? And everybody just cares about quick information online and on the go, on the fly, right? And still, you have all these beautiful print magazines or the coffee table books, where there seems to be a renaissance for these kind of things, where people like proper content, thoroughly researched, thoroughly put together, and presented in a beautiful and professional way.
Thank you. It's interesting because if you do go back and look at some of the earlier issues, I definitely don't think they look very professional looking back at it now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I put my name on that. Um, but I've been very fortunate to have some great conversations with people that have helped guide and give me some advice. Abe Davinoff from Smoke Inn, he uh, he gave me some very real advice at one point. And a lot of the feedback I took, and I was like, I changed it, I tweaked it, and I looked at the magazine, and I reached back out to him. I was like, man, you were right. This looks so much better. And I think that's important, and that goes back to kind of always evolving. There's always something you can change, whether it's a little change, a big change, whatever that might be, um, to continue to improve. It's when you think that you have everything perfect and you stop working towards improving that the day I stop that, I just need to close up shop.
That's very true and very honest, I have to say. Do you personally believe that the cigar world needs more media outlets or more people who try to do that professionally? Um, and at the same time, do you believe that the industry needs more thoroughly researched and well put together content? Because we often discuss that the cigar industry, as beautiful as it still lacks a bit of the same education and the same depth and quality of content compared to the wine industry, for example, the spirits industry, or if you look at all the foodies out there and all the publications around the beautiful gourmandise of the world. We're still lacking a bit of that in the cigar world, I feel. Why is that?
I would agree. I think I don't know if I would say we need more media as a whole. Um, Maybe more defined media, more people that are really doing it as a passion and taking it serious, right? And I'm not saying serious as in snobby or elitist or anything like that, but that they're not just slapping together, some articles, putting it in a PDF and calling it a magazine, or hanging out with their buddy on Zoom and calling it a podcast. Because we do have a lot of that, and I'm not knocking anyone specifically. Just as a whole, I agree. I do think we're lacking serious media, um, on the scale to some of these other industries, like you mentioned. But how we get there, that's the tough part. It seems like a big industry to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's not. that big.
Mhm.
These other industries have much larger budgets when it comes to marketing that pays for that media and keeps those companies alive. Where, this industry doesn't have that large of a budget when it comes to that. So the industry can't support that much serious media.
And do you
So,
think at the end of it all, it has to come from the industry itself, or do you also feel that the end consumer, to a certain extent, is willing to pay money for that kind of content when the quality is there?
I as we continue to progress in things, when you have these podcasts, YouTube, all these free avenues, I think it becomes harder and harder for consumers to go through a paywall for content unless it's superbly premium content. And that's the tricky part. To get there takes time, takes money. Um, we were very fortunate that we we didn't lose money. The first year we didn't make a lot either. But it took probably 3 years to really see some results from it. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone can start something and give it that amount of time and dedication without the income coming in to support it.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about the state of the industry in general. Um, we're at the beginning of 24. We live in exciting times, to say it nicely. But looking at the cigar industry, what were some of the biggest surprises and also some of the biggest takeaways for you from 2023?
Let's see. Um, Nothing really big jumped out at me this past year. Um, some cigars did the, and I can't even try to pronounce it, but Roman Craft's Quinn, whatever, you know, I don't know if you've had the chance to smoke that cigar yet, but it thoroughly surprised me as a cigar. It just is nothing like anything else Roman Craft has put out, in my opinion. It's fantastic. The Eye of the Bull, that kind of really surprised me. That thing is absolutely delicious. And this tiny little cigar took me an hour and 8 minutes to smoke. I was like, wait, what is that? Um, I love what we've seen with the FDA side. I mean, we're still not out of it yet, obviously, but PCA is doing a fantastic job with that, in my opinion. But yeah, there hasn't been any big revelations, I guess, with PCA, some of the big companies coming back this year. That's pretty exciting. Absolutely. Some of the
I
big
think it'll
purchases.
definitely
I
be
was a little surprised about Alec Bradley, being acquired by
a
SCG. I think that one threw me for a loop. So happy for them though.
that was a substantial payday indeed.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I, I'm curious because I mean it seems that SDG has probably not entirely satisfied their appetite yet, to enlarge their footprint in the premium cigar world. So I'm curious as to what 2024 will have installed for us. Great points though on the cigars that you mentioned and that surprised you. Um, I think that the few ones that you mentioned, the Eye of the Bull most certainly made it onto your cigar of the year list, number three, I believe.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
how is the list put together? Going back to the ratings and reviews a little bit, and maybe you can walk us through that process, please.
Absolutely. So that's something that, we changed this year as well. So in previous years, what we would do is just take whichever cigar got the highest rating from that year, and that was cigar of the year. Try to make it pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Um, but as I kind of reflected and got feedback from our readers and just people I talked to, I realized that we were limiting what could get cigar of the year by, one, if we were doing 4 cigars a month in that pack to provide the ratings, there's only 48 cigars that even get the option. And when that pack is $30, you're also taking out any kind of uber luxury, super premium cigars because they'll never be in a pack for $30. So there's all these things I was kind of realizing. I'm like, oh, that's not really fair. Uh, so how do we tweak that? And we go back to giving consumers the voice, giving them, as much power as I can. So this year we tried a little different and just took straight nominations. Nominate any cigar you want. Uh, that got a little interesting in seeing some of the results because some people would put brands, not a cigar, but a brand, or they'd put a maker. Some would just put the year 2023. So I don't know what that meant. But you decide for all that data. And then what we did is we narrowed it down to a top 20. And then from there, again, put it back out and let the consumers vote. And then we just broke it down into a top 10 list. And based on votes, based on the consumer feedback, taking my opinion out of it.
That's one of the very interesting aspects of the whole award season. There seems to be certain brands, certain cigars, certain individuals that plop up on many of these lists, and I'm always curious as to why is that. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And one good example I would say is your cigar of the year, which was the Mi Querida Black Papasaka. And obviously, Dumbarton Tobacco and Trust has had a tremendous presence on a lot of the recently published Cigar of the Year or top 25 lists. Why do you think is that? Is it purely because of the cigar itself, or does it also have to do with how active or how visible the brand owners are on social media, thus impacting people's perception or the brand awareness?
I think both of those things play a huge factor. And, I can see a difference on the social media side for the companies that are promoting the awards, so just for ours, for example, if company A sends out an email like, hey, go vote or go nominate when it comes time for either of those, you definitely see an uptick there versus the companies that don't. So absolutely that plays a factor. I think the cigar has to as well. There's plenty of companies that can promote and promote, but if the cigar doesn't perform, it doesn't perform. We have a much more educated consumer now than we did years ago. So I think that they can see through that to a degree, but marketing will never not be a factor.
And there's this old saying that I like, marketing doesn't make you or your product better or worse. It just exposes you even more. So if the substance is not
Absolutely.
there, it's just a fast track to failure.
Yes.
Jason, we had a great and interesting question from our dear fellow and resident lawyer, Macy Henson. He said he's running around getting ready for Pura Sabor, so unfortunately he's not here with us at the lounge. That being said, he sent the question over on Facebook. He was curious about your dream interview subjects, dead or alive.
Ooh. Um, that is a good one. So Jonathan Drew would be up there. Um, and I've had plenty of conversations with him. We've had plenty of time to talk, but to really sit down and, do an interview would be a blast. Um, Rocky. I mean, there's so many. And one that I think would be surprising just because I think it would be an interesting conversation. Marvin Shankin, you know, I mean, he's the the leader in this, regardless of people's opinions. Just to be able to sit down and have that conversation of where he started, where it is now, I think that would be a really interesting interview.
What's the one question that you would like to ask Marvin Shankin, but you probably wouldn't dare asking?
um, Well, there was definitely questions I would have asked that I've gotten answers to since. So, uh, um, why, you know, why the changes?
Good
You
point.
just wonder sometimes when you see font sizes change of certain words and what's the direction, what's the underlying reason. I'm a curious
Anybody
guy.
outside of the cigar world that you would love to interview and talk with?
Oh my gosh, so many, and Arnold would be a great one, big cigar guy. Um, I try not to really look at celebrities that much in that light, but obviously it'd be great to sit down with any of those guys. Al Pacino, I think would be just a blast, right?
Very true. Good point. Jason, we also had some fabulous questions from Albert, who's here with us at the lounge. So, Albert, first of all, always fantastic to have you with us. Thanks for joining. And I'd be very curious to hear your questions and Jason's thoughts.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
We're just
Trying
having
to unmute. Sorry.
Oh,
uh, just, yeah. Sorry for inconvenience. Well, Reinhard, always a pleasure. Great shows, by the way. Every single week, it's crazy to keep that momentum going. As you're doing it, it's phenomenal. And Jason, pleasure to meet you. And honestly, I never heard about your magazine. Like living in UK and living in Europe and living in like at least 15 different countries around the world, I had never come across your magazine, so that's a new one for me. Um, I have two questions, and one is kind of caught my attention when you just said that your audience, I mean yourself, you said that you wouldn't buy a 50,000 watch, and that immediately triggered something like, hold on, so that your audience wouldn't buy a 50,000 watch as well because that's what you're targeting. So who is your core audience? You mentioned also that cigar package monthly. Well, it's a journal is, cigar journal that you kind of running is quarterly, but the box is sent monthly. That's interesting. So technically it's $90, every quarter. So what the audience, core audience looks like, what are you targeting? Obviously, you're not targeting, people who, make, quite a million a year. I mean, you're targeting something else. So what is that audience? How you would describe that individual or him or her or them?
really great question, and love everything you just said. So it started as we don't look at the demographic, but true cigar smokers, not somebody who smokes a cigar once a month or a couple times a year for celebrations, not the lifestyle smoker, but the actual cigar smoker. Whether that's man, woman, young, old, makes $15 an hour, makes $100,000 a year, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, that's the great thing about cigars is it kind of brings people together. It's the great equalizer, right? I mean, we've all been in a lounge and had a conversation with somebody that we probably never would have in any other situation. So I try to put that out there. The average, you know, not snobby, just people. And by not putting everything towards a certain demographic, I think it kind of opens us up to everybody to a degree. There are people though that are gonna like the kind of uppity, phrasing and all that, and that's just not us. So if you look back at some of our interviews, the whole thing is a conversation. So it's not about, with COVID, it kind of translated more into a Q&A style, but it was always more based on going and having a conversation with somebody like we would at a lounge. Also, a lot of newer smokers. We always try to have stuff in there. partnered with Boveda, which is great company for humidification. I'm sure everybody knows them, but in case you don't, Boveda is fantastic. They provide content in every issue, that kind of educates consumers. So we try to put that out there. That way, when you're new at this, it can be so overwhelming. You make so many mistakes. You ruin so many cigars. It's rough. So if we can help educate people in a way where they don't feel like they're being educated, but it's a little fun, it's a little informative, it's a little bit of that, then that's great. Um, and then, we expand on that with our partnership with PCA, where they provide some content to tell people about what's going on in the legislative side of the industry, because a lot of people don't know about that. A lot of, regular everyday consumers don't think about what that's doing and how that's going to impact them down the road. So that our core demographic is everyone who smokes cigars, you know?
Well, daily smokers, more or less, I guess, or based on how many cigars you send them every month, that would work out probably 1 or 2 cigars a week, something around
Yeah.
that.
So it averages, about one a week when you get 4 a month.
Mm.
But the other part of that is, that they're smoking outside of that. So, if somebody's buying our pack, but they smoke 1 cigar a month, they're never going to catch up, right? I mean, so that it kind of guides them that way.
All right. That's a great answer. I mean, I was expecting to hear that it's like seasoned cigar smoker. I like that negative side of it is what you're excluding is snobs and really that kind of people probably would be reading Cigar Aficionado. That a lot of working class people, they would now at this point they slowly abandoning Cigar Aficionado. So that's a great thing to know. And the second question was more about targeting a little bit at yourself, because I mean you are technically a face of that magazine. On top of that, every magazine, if it's not yellow pages, that's very informative, or something that just writes about what celebrities are doing, or just you have to do a little bit of researching, and that is one of the skills for professional journalists. And since journalism is a profession, so not every amateur can do that, the right way. So how would you describe that perfect cigar journalist as a persona?
I think it depends on the reader. Some readers are going to want that journalist to be super informed, do all the research, know every little bit of information, where somebody else is going to want it to come from a journalist that's speaking to them like they're friends, that it's just a conversation between two people. Um, and that's the great thing. That's what I love about this is how I write and how I put stuff out there is so different than Reinhard. I mean, that guy speaks so eloquently that, you definitely can tell I'm American, right? When we're talking together. So it's fantastic that there's a voice for everybody. You don't have to kind of get pigeonholed into a little box. You can be yourself when you're a journalist because you're speaking to your readers.
Well, that makes perfect sense, and I guess I see some people laughing from what you said about Reinhard, but that's very true. And I think I don't have any additional questions at this point, but just to wrap that second question, so how you describe your style?
I like to be the guy that you're talking to in a lounge, that you're sitting there having a conversation. You don't have to grab a dictionary to figure out what I'm talking about. You know, we're just two people having a conversation. You take everything off the table, and at the end of the day, the cigar is what's bringing us together.
Makes sense. So again, thank you, Reinhard, for our opportunity. And then, Jason, I'm gonna look into your magazine, and I got curious now, So thanks again.
Thank you so much for the questions.
Albert, wonderful to hear you, to see you, and many thanks for your wonderful contribution. Much appreciated. One thing that I would like to add to what you two just discussed is that in today's world, with online media giving everybody a voice instantaneously, one thing that I find very important is to realize that the borders between journalism in the way we probably used to interpret it and opinion has become very blurry. And it's not only is it difficult, but I just think that many people do not even make that distinction anymore. And so much of what's out there in terms of quote unquote information is just taken for granted, simply because you read somebody's Facebook post. And how often have people been shocked to realize that a certain individual has not passed away, even though they read somebody's weird posting on Facebook or Instagram about XYZ having passed away. And that's just one very stupid, I will admit, example of, do we even question what's put in front of us in terms of quote unquote information? And as a journalist, and I dare calling myself one in certain instances and certain obligations, it's a different responsibility in the way that you do your research and whatever you put out there and share with other people, compared to, and this is probably more applicable for the majority of the cigar media outlets, it's an opinion-based piece that you put out there, besides probably the manifold sharing or postings of a press release that you received from a manufacturer, a brand owner. And I would encourage, and I'd be very happy to see a more open conversation about that distinction. Or Albert, I love the fact that you mentioned journalism being a profession, and it requires a certain code of conduct, maybe, or a certain code of ethnicity, ethics, compared to just having a passionate side gig and putting your opinion out on social media. And I very much hope that we all in today's day and age become more critical again and start to question what's out there in terms of information and try to make a more educated or formulate a more educated opinion ourselves. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this. Albert, feel free to chime in, please. But Jason, of course, also to you. I think this is an important distinction.
Absolutely. And I think you're right with cigar media. It is majorly kind of opinion based. And I think it goes back to the subjective nature of what we're discussing, right, with cigars. You don't see as many articles on like the history of something where that research is kind of needed as you used to. And it's kind of interesting that you bring that up, because we think about that sometimes, and are we losing out on the history of cigars because we're always chasing what's new and what's next? So that has to be playing a factor in my opinion. There definitely does need to be some more structure around it. And I don't know if there's, like a definition for it, if there's a way we can determine, a classification of media. It gets tricky, and I think at the trade show, it's a prime example. and they have issues every year with media there. Who is media, who's not? But who's to say who is and isn't, you know? I mean, for them, they can dictate obviously who comes, but at the end of the day, if somebody is watching your podcast or if they're reading your article, your media, it might be to 10 people, but again, it does go back to I think it is opinion based at its core because we are losing that the journalistic side, the research side, the history behind this industry.
That's actually, well, it's very open question, to be honest. That's what Reinhard, the way he put it. Well, there's so many associations, American Society, I think, of journalists and authors. Then the one I'm kind of following, investigative reporters and editors, and there is so many others. One thing they have in common, they have something called code of conduct. And if you are, a magazine or you are a journalist and you writing your opinion, there is nobody really to govern you, only your readers. So you can, start posting a lot of things that not true, unchecked, not properly checked. How you deal with that?
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously people will do their own research, and it kind of goes back to, I mean, a lot of things now. Is it true or is it true to you? Everyone's truth is different, alternative truths and all this kind of stuff out there. Um, where I think all this plays the most factor is kind of the season we're in now, right? The award season and ratings and such like that. That's where I think a code of conduct and transparency is most vital in the media we're seeing now. How are those ratings chosen? Who's giving that rating? What was the criteria? Um, if it's just one person doing a blog, then obviously it's their opinion. There's nothing else to it. But when it's a magazine, who's giving that opinion? What factors are being played in? Because I mean, we all hear, oh, that rating was paid for. How many times has that came up? I mean, and there is truth to that. Not with everybody, obviously. I hope not, anyways. I can say mine aren't because, it's easy. It's easy to put the blame on the consumer, right? That's what I'm doing here. I'm taking the blame off me. But at the end of the day, that's a concern. And to me, I think that's where a code of conduct could come in handy. Trusted media, but again, what agency or what group determines who that trusted media is? And who's to say that that's not going to be skewed by some personal bias or monetary or whatever else it might be?
All excellent points that both of you made, and it always makes me laugh, and I find it very entertaining, to be honest, when I see heated debates over on social media about ratings, reviews, the best cigar of the year, and why a crazy expensive cigar made it onto that list, or another inexpensive bundle cigar made it to another list. That's something I find very curious because it somehow portrays the idea that, people do care about these things, which I love and which I find very important. And at the same time, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think it's so important to clearly differentiate. Well, this is somebody's opinion, and that's perfectly fine. Who am I to judge somebody else's opinion on whether they liked X cigar or Y cigar? And as long as we don't take ourselves too seriously on that, I think we're in a good position, or we're in a good place. At the same time, though, once the publication reaches a certain reach or a certain width and depth, obviously it also has an impact on people's livelihoods, and a certain rating in Cigar Aficionado, I think most people could argue, can catapult your brand to new heights. And in fact, you mentioned Alec Bradley earlier. I think Alan Rubin and his sons are very open and honest when they say that the number one cigar ranking that they received put them in a lot of trouble, because suddenly they couldn't keep up with the demand that they saw for their product, and it cost them a hell of an issue, and it was a challenging situation to manage. So it's all interesting dynamics. That's what I'm trying to say. And to a certain extent, it is an opinion, and it will remain an opinion. That's perfectly fine. But we just have to be more critical, I guess. Also, when it comes to the code of conduct that you mentioned, and to try and differentiate: is this just somebody's opinion, or is this a well-respected large media entity that will, at the end of the day, affect people's livelihoods? And that's a different ballgame altogether.
Definitely be held to a different standard at a certain level. Absolutely.
Great point. Brian, you had your hand up for a while, and show us some sunny, warm, fuzzy California. We're freezing our asses off here in Belgium, and it's snowing outside. So give us some eye candy, man.
It's cloudy, but I mean it's warm enough. Let's see here. There's the it's like winter, right?
Man, if that's what winter looks like to you, I could show you pictures.
Yeah. It's probably pretty nice in Florida right now, I imagine.
We're having, and people will laugh, especially I'm sure Reinhard, where he's at, I don't even want to know the temperature, but it's 40s, 50s today. So for Florida, that's cold.
Yeah, that's LA cold. Yeah. I grew up in Montana, so I grew up in the cold, but you come to LA and live here for enough years, and 40 degrees, you're like, oh my God.
Well, you get used to it real quick, and I don't miss the cold weather. I grew up in Kentucky. We had all the seasons, so used to snow. Yeah, I'm not going back.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah, I'm not buying a $50,000 watch kind of guy either, but I am just putting it out there, open to receiving a $50,000 watch as a gift. If anyone's Macy, Albert, I'm just letting you know. So
applications can be sent to Reinhard at lightemupworld.com.
There you go.
Happy to put you in touch with Brian.
Yeah. So I liked a lot of this, going back to the thing about awards, and I always think about the movies. I always think about the Oscars too. I'm like, who's voting on this stuff? Like, who's why these movies? They always fall into a certain genre. It's never a comedy, I guess, because why? We don't like to laugh, I guess. So Oscars are like, oh no, we're only serious films can be the best film of the year. Well, some people like comedies. I don't know. That's not really relevant. But I was thinking, I like the way you're, taking the cigar and breaking it down into different categories. Shout out to I want to say Karen. I'm pretty sure not Karen Berger, but sweet English gal that comes on the call from time to time, and she had raised this point several times on the Zoom to different people about the idea in terms of cigar ratings and visually. So the artwork, the bands, the box, that whole aspect coming into that number that we see at the end. And like we were saying earlier, the number pretty much is just the cigar, how it performs and how it tastes. And for me, I don't have a great palate, and that's not always necessarily, I'll admit it doesn't factor in, certainly not 100% factor into what I'm buying. So I do look at story behind the cigar, or the brand, the look, and all that sensory stuff that goes into it. So I think that's pretty fascinating. I think in terms of most people that are reviewing cigars, probably, if you read maybe a Cigar Coupe kind of thing, he'll have one line maybe where he just kind of describes it and throws out his opinion about the appearance. of the band and this and that, but it's never a part of the score. So I think that's cool, to give your readers the opportunity to take in all these different aspects of the smoking experience.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it goes further than the band, the wrapper itself. We've all seen a cigar that just visually looks stunning or maybe not so stunning, right? Um, so I think all that plays a factor. And what I liked about it is it allows you when you're looking at those ratings, maybe you're a big draw guy. Like a bad draw is just going to ruin that cigar for you. That's your focal point, or maybe it's construction, whatever it is. It lets you dial in on, okay, this cigar got a 9.3 on the draw, but an 8.6 on flavor. Hey, maybe it just wasn't the flavor profile they want because my palate's so different than everybody else. I'm still going to give that a try. So it kind of lets you pinpoint what's important to you. And
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I love what, you talked about movies there for a second. I love movies. One thing that has kind of hurt us on the ratings doing not the 100-point scale, you got out of 10, a 9.1 is a phenomenal score, but a lot of people kind of read it as a 91 and they're like, oh, that's good. But, as a movie guy, I don't know if you're familiar with the website IMDb, but it's everything, right? I mean, if you go on there and look at the best movies ever, they do like their top list and it's all based on consumer, viewer driven data. I think the number one movie, I haven't checked lately, but it should still be Shawshank Redemption. And I want to say it's like a 9.2, maybe a 9.3 as the best movie ever made. Like 9.5, 9 point, those things just don't really happen.
Yeah.
So
out of a 10-point scale.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
People are looking for, yeah.
I mean, I always think it's kind of hilarious. We've talked about this before too, this 100-point system for cigars, and you never see anything below 80. I don't think I ever have, or 80. I mean, 85 is bad, I guess, apparently. Like if I read a review and the review is like, it had construction problems and it didn't draw and it tasted like it was burnt and it was tunneling, and they give it an 85. And I'm like, this is not a 100-point scale at all. You're just being kind, or I don't know. It's weird. It's basically a 10-point scale, really, or a 20.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a fan of everything you're saying. So okay, so that was more of a comment, but this is a question. And I guess I'm showing my age or something in terms of technology. I'm trying to do the club on the website, and I'm like going down a rabbit hole, and I cannot figure it out. I'm sorry.
Nope, you are absolutely fine. So we recently went through a change and we moved, and for a variety of reasons, but we moved that the rating club reviewer pack, whatever we're calling it, to a brick and mortar lounge. So we took away selling cigars on our website. And again, there's a few reasons for that. One was some of the relationships we have with different brands. They're kind of like, hey, maybe you don't do that. And I kind of understand where they're coming from. So that lounge is based here in Florida. So it's called Blend and Barrel. So if you look up Blend and Barrel,
I'm on their website. I can't find it on their website.
On Blend and Barrel?
Unless I don't know, I can't find it. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna have to reach out.
I don't know. Is it under shop? I don't know. Shop cigars. I'm gonna keep looking. I don't know. I'm gonna get. Sorry.
Well, you have my name. Reach out to me. I'm gonna get with them. Maybe they're having a tech issue or something. I'll figure that out. But yeah, no, it's definitely on there. They also do an event each month where they kind of release it and stuff like that. So, and it just goes back to supporting brick and mortar versus online. That's a huge debate, in this industry. So if I'm going to sit there and say, hey, I'm for the growth of this industry, I need to kind of back that up with my actions, right?
Cool. All right. Thank you. Cheers.
No, thank you.
Mace, over to you, buddy.
Good evening, everybody. Reinhard, pleasure as always to see you. Jason, great to meet you.
You as well.
So I'm similar to, I guess, Albert's situation in that I hadn't come across your publication. So this is kind of by way of introduction from Reinhard. It's great to hear about you and great to hear about what you're doing. And I had a couple of questions, actually about three questions now. One of them is based on the answer you just gave a minute ago, but the first one just, and I might have missed it because I joined quite late in the call, but what process do you go through when you're or when you were selecting those cigars that you're sending out to the subscribers? Was that just based on your sort of like and what you prefer, what your team are sort of selecting? Or I'm sorry if you've already answered this before, but yeah, just interested to see what process you go through to say, right, these are the cigars in this quarter's pack. Here you go.
So absolutely. When we were still doing it ourselves and selling it through the website, it was a multitude of things. Obviously, relationships will play a factor. There's a brand that reached out and said, "Hey, we really want to be reviewed." We'd work something out. And I would always purchase the cigars, or trust me, people weren't just sending us cigars and we're making all the money on that club. We made no money on that club. Um, but for the most part, it wasn't based on my profile, and that was intentionally. I sat there and I thought, why would I just send out cigars that I like? Everyone has different palates. Like I'm not a very mild cigar smoker. I like more full bodied, but we would send out plenty of Connecticut's, and what I would try to do is each pack curate it to do one of two things. One, get four completely different cigars with four completely different experiences, different, you know, countries of origin, different sizes, whatever it may be. Or every now and then, maybe something that's kind of very similar in each one. So you could see what different brands could do with similar tobaccos, but presented in a different way. Um, we would also do things like in the colder months, even though being in Florida or California, we don't get colder months that often, go with some smaller cigars. We would purposely during winter try not to send out a Churchill because a lot of people were not living in Florida and California and being in kind of colder climates. So we try to be cautious of that. Now that we're not in complete full control of that, since it's passed on to a brick and mortar lounge, we kind of let them do that. Now there's still some companies that will reach out and say, "Hey, we really want to get this review done," and I'll work through the lounge in order to make sure we can get that happen.
Great answer. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. I guess in sort of tying into that sort of relationship management aspect of things and kind of what you touched on with regards to how you're having to move away from the online to a brick and mortar side of things. So the relationships in the industry, right? It's one of those sort of it's an unspoken thing in terms of as with people, you've got great people, you've got supportive people in the industry, and let's just call it what it is. You've got, assholes in the industry, right? And I guess my question to you is just purely again, it comes back to sort of it's a full loop in terms of the journalistic integrity, relationship management, everything else. If you're, let's say, trying to reach out to Jonathan, you're trying to get Drew Estate, you're trying to get an interview with them, and you were to get a negative interview, and this could be a negative response, it could be anybody in the industry. How does that affect, or has that affected in the past, your then sort of view on the cigar, or do you try and keep it separate in that you might have reached out to somebody at Aganorsa Leaf or anywhere else, got a really crappy response like, listen, we ain't got the time, we're not interested, get out of here. How has that, if at all, impacted, or would it impact your views on saying, you know what, forget that brand. These guys, they're just a bunch of really crappy people. We're not going to even, or do you actually say, you know what, that's fine. That's this one individual, but I still like the cigars. Or I'm still going to rate the cigars, or I'm still, how do you draw that line? And this is, I'm sort of putting you on the spot here, so apologies for that, but how do you manage that?
No, absolutely. That is a fantastic question. And it's one that I've had in the past of other brands and media and such. So kind of multifaceted answer. In regards to the review or the rating, it doesn't impact because, again, it's not my sole rating. It's a multitude of consumers, and, it's constantly changing. So, it's not the same five people always reviewing the cigars. You have the same five palettes forever, which is another reason why I like giving those consumers the voice. I've definitely included cigars of brands that I don't love the person or a person in the company, or maybe it's just not my profile. Because again, it's not really about me. Um, so I don't let it affect that. Now, where it has affected is there's companies that I've dealt with that it did not go well for whatever reason. Maybe that person was mean. Maybe I didn't present myself the right way. Whatever it is, sometimes things just don't click. The only way it's impacted that is I just won't take their money for advertisements. I've said no to not many, but there's been a couple times where I've refused advertisement with a company based on a relationship with that brand. Because I don't want to take somebody's money that I don't respect.
Great answer. Great answer. I appreciate that. And yeah, I know I put you in a bit of a tricky spot there, but yeah, that was a great answer. Great feedback on that. I guess the final question is just sort of touching on that point that you raised a minute ago about switching from online to brick and mortar and supporting the industry. And I'm going to speak very selfishly, sort of being in Europe, as per Albert and Ian who are on the call, we're out here in Europe and we want to try and, most of our US or some of the cigars that we can get aren't available out here, right? So we are tending to buy online. What's your view on the industry when COVID hit, realized and very much jumped on well, let's ship it out there. You had companies setting up, sort of warehouses and everything else going to online. And I kind of get this feeling now that post-COVID world, the industry is kind of like, well, no, we gotta get back into supporting brick and mortar. And it's again, it's like this fine line. What are your thoughts on that transition? And you're having to transition from online to brick and mortar, but overall, like long term, what's your view on that?
Another fantastic question, man. So I believe there's definitely a space for online retail. There's no way around it. There's areas where people live where they don't have a lounge near them. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 3 hours. You get someplace out in the Midwest and it might be 5 hours. Those people don't have the luxury of going to a lounge every day to have a cigar. Now, where I do have issues is the online retailers that sell at discounts well below what brick and mortars are allowed to sell. That's where it becomes problematic. If let's just easy math, cigar retails for $10, brick and mortar lounge is told they can't advertise that cigar to be less than $9, and then you see it online for $6.50. That's where I have a problem. I definitely think consumers need online, but not at the sacrifice of livelihoods of people that are running these brick and mortar lounges that are, they need that to survive, to feed their families.
Yeah, fully agree with that. It shouldn't be at the sacrifice of the brick and mortars and people who are earning money. So yeah, that's a great answer. And yeah, really appreciate the feedback and great meeting you. And yeah, I'll definitely be looking you up. And yeah, great stuff, man. Good luck. All the best.
Hey, thank you so much.
Jason, speaking of that, what's in store for 2024? Do you have any changes planned for the new year? Any surprises or any new projects with Ash Quarterly, or is it going to be business as usual and trying to strengthen the substance of the brand and your platform?
So definitely strengthen, always. I'm sure there's going to be some changes. There's nothing huge right now that we're planning on changing, or any big announcements or anything like that. This past year at PCA, we did a big change in not fully moving away from print, but a substantial change in, our distribution model where, and that just came from all the COVID issues here. We were running into, we would publish the magazine digitally, send it to printers same day. The print copies wouldn't come in until the next issue is being published digitally at that point. So it was just so behind the eight ball that we moved our focus from sending the physical copies out to brick and mortar lounges. Because again, that was just a big thing for me. And we always did it for free. They weren't paying anything. So we moved from that to our new QR code program, which we rolled out at PCA. And we partnered with Karen Berger, Don Kiki Cigars, and created this cool little QR code sticker. I don't know if you can kind of see it all there, but it kind of looks like the magazine. And it literally has a little QR code at the bottom that you can scan and read every issue. We always have every issue online for free. So that was our big change. We're probably going to expand on that is the big goal this year. So we'll be at TPE. We still have, those with her. We'll probably change who that program is with each year to keep it a little fresh, but it allows lounges, to put that wherever it fits best in their lounge. Maybe it's in the humidor, maybe it's right by the register, wherever it is. And let's be honest, most people in lounges, they're on their phone now. That conversation is slowly going away and more people are on their phone, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So that's the big focus, is expanding on that QR code program and continue to fine tune, tweak, see what's working, what's not. And the biggest thing is, we're constantly asking for feedback. What do people want to see in that magazine? What features had difference with the ratings, or, maybe something similar to the Ladies of Leaf, but a different demographic of the industry, whatever that might be.
Beautiful answer. And again, it shows that you truly put the consumer first. I love the fact that you offer all of the content, all of the information that you have in the magazine for free to the end consumer. And it's so important to have more of these platforms that share in-depth information with the end consumer and provide opportunities to take that deep dive into the world of tobacco and cigars. So kudos for that, Jason, and many thanks for your work. Many thanks for your contribution to our beloved industry. I certainly look forward to catching up with you over a cigar in Vegas in just 2 months' time. So PCA is literally around the corner again. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have you with us at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Many thanks for joining us, and again, many thanks for your work, and keep it up. It's appreciated and it's needed. So for everybody out there, find Ash Quarterly, give it a read, give it a try, and Jason, the very best to you and to your family and to your team for continued success, and keep growing Ash Quarterly.
Thank you, Reinhard. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
With great pleasure. It's been all ours. Jason Falkenberg from Ash Quarterly, many thanks for being at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Next week, same time, same station, we'll be back right here. We'll have Thierry joining us from Chateau Diadème. So I'm very much looking forward to next week's show as well. And until then, you all stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Light 'em up, everybody, and goodbye for today. Cheers.
Thanks, Reinhard. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks.